Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I learn how technology is transforming our lives, work, entire industries, and even world. But how ultimately technology works best when it brings people together. And I know you're listening to me all over the world right now. And I think we all share the same concerns around energy costs, food prices, and overall cost of living. But can technology help with this at all? Well, today's guest is on a mission to improve access to credit for millions of people by building the world's best credit builder. And they do that by offering the proper path to good credit. But there is an inspirational story behind this journey, which began in Japan, where today's guest was working with the homeless and a big issue team, and he heard stories of hardship, and he opened his eyes to the importance of financial inclusion. And he would hear these same stories in Canada, South America, as well as Japan, and I wanted to learn more about his personal story. So today's guest is Sho Sugihara, and he's the co-founder and CEO of a company called Pave. So with that scene set, buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to London here in the UK, where you can join me in listening to Sho's inspirational story today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, Neil. My name is Sho. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Pave. We're a fintech based in the UK. I started my career in Japan, actually, in the social sector, and I grew up in Japan, so that's where things kind of kicked off. I began working with the homeless there for the Big Issue, which is a social enterprise that helps people get back into employment. And after that, I moved on to Brazil, where I worked in microfinance and communities and social work. It was kind of a broad role, but those were the things that I focused on. And I think that's where really I got the entrepreneurial spark or interest, at least, since I worked for an entrepreneur there who was very inspiring. I then moved to consultancy for a while and paid off some debt, saved up some money, and used those funds to kick off Pave. And we have a mission to create a more fair financial system by giving access to fair credit to millions more people. And we do that through a credit score building app that is B2C focused. But we've also recently launched a B2B credit analytics product to help lenders make better decisions. So we take a sort of two-pronged approach. But yeah, in a highest level summary, that's what I do and that's what we do.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there, because although this is a tech podcast, I'm a big believer in learning more about the story behind a company. And for example, your story there, you spent your first half of your life in Japan, where you started your career working for the Big Issue to help the homeless by delivering magazines to newspapers, vendors, and then from there into the world of microfinance. So can I ask you, share your origin story or maybe the moment that helped shape the path that you're on right now? Because I feel like there's something that happened there.
Yeah, look, I was kind of really lucky to have a diverse background from the get-go. So I grew up in Japan and I went through the public schooling system there until, primary school. But my mom's English and my dad's Japanese, which kind of meant I moved between different countries. But yeah, mainly there in Japan. And I guess the sort of connection with the Big Issue, my mom used to drive me to preschool in Kyoto. I lived in the mountain ranges around Kyoto, and yeah, my family home is still there. But I remember one of my earliest memories, one of them was Clinton getting elected randomly, but the other one was when she was driving me to school, and we drove past the river in Kyoto. It's called the Kamo River, and it's a beautiful place. But there, as any river does, there's bridges across them. And I remember in Japan, you typically see these blue plastic sort of tarps that homeless people use to create kind of shelters under the bridge. And I remember seeing these and I guess getting it was more confusion than anything at the time, and asking my mom, like, what are those, and why are people living there? And I do remember that very, very clearly. And I think it's hard to say exactly rationally how that connects to what I do today, but certainly from an emotional perspective, I remember feeling that it was an injustice, and something that made me upset, and something that kind of stuck with me. And so when I was in high school, I actually was schooled in Canada, which is kind of where my accent comes from. Yeah. But I then had a summer where I was encouraged by the school to go and work on a project that interested me. And so I went back to Japan. I emailed the big issue out of the blue, and said, "Hey, look, if you're looking for anyone who will do anything for you, give me a shout." And so ended up doing a several month kind of placement with them in their Osaka main office. And actually, the interesting thing with the big issue is that Japan was their first market outside of the UK that they entered. And so, I spent the summer. Mainly, my role was to restock the supplies for the homeless vendors, because, of course, they live in various locations, but coming to the headquarters to restock requires train fare and time. And so we would go out and deliver these magazines to them. And so I'd have like a stack of 300 magazines on this like terrible bicycle that in 40-degree Osaka heat with the sun beating down on you, I would cycle through the city. And but all of that was kind of neither here nor there. The most exciting thing for me was being able to speak to these people and hear their life stories, hear how they had got to where they are today, but also, more importantly, their aspirations. And I just remember feeling like, wow, there is so much you can unlock here, and so much you can do to kind of influence this journey. And there's so much potential. And I remember thinking that was a very meaningful pursuit and way to spend one's time. And so, that was, I guess, a kind of momentous experience for me. And I took that to then Brazil, where I wanted to, again, work in social sector causes, and started working with the disadvantaged community in Brazil as a volunteer, living in a shack. It really was a shack for almost a year, helping with keeping kids off the streets, but also helping deliver public sector services like microfinance or conditional cash transfer initiatives, which again was a really powerful experience for me.
It really is such a beautiful story. And I always say at the end of every episode on here is technology works best when it brings people together. And I love the fact that you've been in Japan, Canada, Brazil, and the UK, and spending time with people and listening to their stories and how that has helped shape you and leverage technology. And I read that, I think it was after university, you worked at McKinsey for 3 years to save up cash to finally start your own business before leaving to co-found Pave out of Entrepreneur First back in 2017. So can you tell me more about Pave and how you're solving some of those problems with technology around this fairer financial system and your credit score app, just for anyone that's hearing about Pave for the first time?
Yeah, for sure. I was interviewed by one of the partners at McKinsey for the final round. And I remember telling them, like, look, my plan here is to do maximum 3 years with you. And then start my own company. And they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. Because they do have a pretty good way of trying to keep you in the firm with the benefits and everything. But no, I kind of stood true to that, or stayed true to that. I think within 2 years managed to pay off all the student debt that I had. And then with the final year, save up enough cash to burn for 2 or 3 years to go and find something that I wanted to solve for. And to be honest, I think, you can start companies in many ways. One is to have already a very acute understanding of a problem that a customer faces. And then, usually you get exposed to those through industry experience or personal experience or whatnot. That wasn't quite our story. Chris, my co-founder at EF, and I took a bit more of a macro approach. We joined EF without a specific idea, but what we did see and what we were interested in, this was 2017, 2018. So Deliveroo and Uber were, they've been around for a while, but they were really starting to get a kind of a hold in the market. And we went around interviewing these poor, mainly Deliveroo riders They didn't trust us at all at first. So we were like, okay. And so I went to ride for Deliveroo, got all the kit, and had a Deliveroo jacket, which helped. Deceive is a strong word, but I would stand around Shoreditch in front of one of those kind of food market stalls where a lot of the riders would concentrate, and we started speaking with them, asking them about their finances. We did have a hunch that finance as a self-employed person would be quite tricky, and we began iterating on a solution. And to share the true and raw story here, it took us a ton of iteration to get to the credit score building point. But maybe after a year and a bit of trying different products, from benefits delivery support to tax returns to all of this stuff using open banking technology, we figured out that actually one of the more interesting and underserved issues that riders and other non-conventional earners were facing was difficulty accessing credit for various reasons, whether they had past blemishes on their credit file, which is the data set that lenders use to judge whether they're going to lend to you, or they simply had just migrated to the UK from Brazil or Poland or other places, and they didn't have an established credit history. And we felt like, okay, interesting. If we can solve this issue, this is kind of core to many other financial access issues. And so at that point, we started looking at credit score building and credit, went through a lot of FCA applications to get the right licenses, and then launched a credit builder product, which is true to its form then today as well. But in a nutshell, what the product does is we offer a subscription fee based way to build your credit score, as opposed to a credit card, which has interest rates and late fees and other things that can be quite unexpected. So it's a much more predictable way of building credit. And what we do is we help you predict your bill payments and monitor your cash flow so you don't ever go into the negative or overdraft territory. And then, subject to approval, we also extend a credit line. And this is a small credit line that is intended as a backstop, where if you don't have enough money in your account, you can draw down on the credit line to protect yourself against a late bill payment. And that's important, because if you miss a bill payment, that can damage your credit score. And it's a very, very common reason we see people starting to, negatively impact their own credit scores. So that's what the Pave app, the consumer side of what we do, is doing at the moment.
Fantastic. And of course, fast forward to 2022, we're all seeing an extreme income volatility and an unprecedented surge in energy prices and living costs, etc. And in times like these, can you tell me a little bit more about how you see new opportunities to help customers during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly it's a really challenging time for consumers, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but I do think it's going to get even tougher as we approach winter. Energy prices go up further, and then also I think we haven't quite seen the full shakeout of the, I guess, macroeconomic kind of companies folding, et cetera, and layoffs that we're expecting to see. The other thing I would add is we are already seeing a historic spike in credit card utilization. So I think I read earlier this week that the utilization or increase in credit card usage is the highest it's been in the UK since 2005, if I recall correctly. So look, not just to paint the doom and gloom here, what are the opportunities? I think, first of all, these are ever evolving. So you do have to keep a very close eye on customers and make sure that you interview them. I mean, back in 2020, when COVID hit, as a kind of anecdote, we did loads of interviews and kind of came up with a counterintuitive, at that point in time, insight, which was that actually furlough, working from home, all these things had helped consumers save money for the first time, mainly because of, lots of quantitative easing happening in the market. And that meant that many people, for the first time, were able to think long-term about, how do I get access to a mortgage now that I've been able to pay down my credit card debt? And credit score building became very, very pertinent and top of mind. And so back then we shifted our attention heavily towards the credit side. Now, obviously that problem still exists, but we're seeing, and we've invested a lot more in our bills management technology. So we've redesigned our products interface to help make bills management more intuitive. And we've also invested a lot of time in CRM and marketing that attaches to your bank data. So we give you like a weekly roundup of what bills are coming up and whether we think your cash flow is going to be positive by the end of the week to just give you enough time to prepare. And so, I think there are always new opportunities that you do have to tailor to the market and consumer conditions. And we're staying sort of true to that. I think the one last thing I'll mention is upfront, I mentioned we have a two-pronged approach, a B2C app and a B2B lending analytics business. I think one of the other issues we're going to see is a lot of lenders today have to make decisions using credit file data, but credit file data is a aggregation of a consumer's past behavior. It usually reflects where you are 1 month ago. And what happens with high income volatility climates is that obviously 1 month ago is very different to where you are today. And we're offering a new piece of technology that can help lenders see consumer financial health in real time and also with a kind of forecasted view. And so that's something as a new angle that we're investing in, given the current market that we're seeing.
And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a bit of research on you guys. And I also noticed that Pave had recently launched a B2B credit decisioning tool called Fuse. So can you tell me more about Fuse and the problems you aim to help businesses with that tool as well?
Yeah, so exactly that. So the Fuse is the B2B analytics product I mentioned that we've launched recently. How this came about was over the past 6 months, I would say, maybe 7 or 8. We were approached by a few fintechs in the space saying, look, looks like you've done a lot of work in credit and open banking technology. Can you help us, take transaction data and make sense of it for underwriting consumer loans or other reasons? And we were initially like, well, we're B2C at the moment. We did have long-term plans to do something like Fuse, but it wasn't quite as immediate. And what we did then was benchmark our technical capabilities against incumbents offering Fuse-like services. And we found that actually our algorithms performed really, really well. So I guess 2 examples to back that up. Our open banking credit models perform quite a bit better than a major incumbent in the space. And we've also managed to prove with our own data that open banking based analytics can perform better, if not on par with credit file based analytics. And those 2 things gave us the confidence to launch Fuse. And Fuse is sort of it's an all-in-one platform for assessing your consumer or customer cash flow. And that's important for making affordability decisions when making a lending decision of, how much can this consumer afford in repayments if I lend them X amount of money. But in addition to that, it also does some much more advanced things, which are basically creating custom credit risk features using that transaction data. So to kind of reduce that jargon into something more tangible, we will look at a consumer's spending behavior and say like, okay, this person donates to charity, this person does gambling, or this person does gaming or whatnot. And there are some really interesting and counterintuitive insights you can derive from those credit risk features. And if you feed those into your decisioning and analytics as a lender, you can make much more robust decisions. So you can accept more people and reduce your losses at the same time. And so Fuse also offers that advanced credit analytics technology as well. And yeah, we do think this is very, very timely. As you mentioned upfront, income volatility rising means you really need to have a better, fuller, and more real-time picture of consumer finance. And that's what Fuse is enabling.
So you have the Pave app, which is aimed at B2C customers, and then the B2B services you're expanding with Fuse. How do these 2 complement each other, would you say?
I guess kind of going back a bit. In university, like what I focused on a lot was I did a lot of like politics and sociology, but I'm a big proponent of system-wide change. I think I love complex systems that are, you might think I'm a freak, but I love complex systems that are heavily bureaucratic because they're the toughest things to change. But also, if you are able to make a dent in them, you can impact so many more people. Yeah. And I think the the Pave app is consumer focused, as you say, and that's one way of helping create a fairer financial system by building people's credit scores and expanding access to credit. But we also once we had that conviction that our technology and algorithms were really good, we started thinking, okay, but we can also influence the system by changing how lenders make decisions. And so for us, it's a sort of two-pronged approach to making systemic change. And there's many more angles you could also attack this problem by, like figuring out ways to do better debt financing that is cheaper for lenders, so it lowers the cost of capital, and helping them get products to market faster. There's loads more we could do, but these are the two things we're focused on right now. How they're complementary is super interesting because, of course, the Pave app on its own helps people build their credit history, but at the same time, we are getting smarter in understanding consumer trends, but also what constitutes a healthy credit consumer versus a less healthy one. And we can take that understanding and use it to build our credit analytics modules with Fuse. And so the app really boosts our internal IP, but understanding of consumer credit health, which we can then inject back into the system, but more from a B2B angle. So they really work in tandem. And that's been a unique point that we have in the market. I don't think there's only maybe 2 or 3 other firms globally that I know of that are taking this approach of having putting our money where our mouth is on the B2C side, and then abstracting those learnings into a B2B focused API.
And I think certainly with the business tool, there'll be a lot of business listeners listening, thinking this sounds a great opportunity for us, but they're going to go speak to their IT director, who will say, well, tell me about the tech behind it and the implementation and all those technical kind of questions. So as this is a tech podcast, can you tell me a little bit more about the tech that makes all this possible, and any information that will be relevant to any IT people listening?
Yeah, for sure. So we very, very happy to, for anyone who's interested, there's a section on our website on paveapp.com that has Fuse kind of a high level detail on it, but also we have API docs and everything that we can share. We've made them to a sexy startup standard, so they're really easy to use and understand, of course, and integration for our basic set of APIs is a matter of days, not weeks. In terms of the specific tech that sits behind it, this might be less relevant for integration purposes, but just so you understand what kind of stack we have. But yeah, we use Ruby on Rails for our APIs. It's very fast, it's solid, and it's a tried and tested foundation for powering API solutions like this. And we use Postgres for our database, and then all of this lives on the cloud thanks to Heroku. We also have mainly event-driven architecture using Sidekick and a bit of Kafka to make sure that the tech is super scalable. And of course, we use the same API tech to power our app, which has hundreds of thousands of users on it. So we know it's scalable and also can deal with spikes in demand because we do update people's credit files once a month in the app, and that creates a massive load on our servers. But it's proven to be fine. And then on the more data sciencey side, mainly we're using AWS Lambda to run our models. And then these are built on Python primarily, amongst other things as well. But Python is the main language powering that.
Awesome. And for the average person listening to this podcast, they can see what's on the horizon and they want to start improving their credit score. Are there any tips or advice that you would offer anyone listening on how they can do that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to note is that it's very country dependent. So UK, US, Canada, and then in a couple of other markets, the top 3 credit bureaus have quite a strong foothold. So that's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And you want to be checking your scores with each. And usually they are publicly available and free to access given legislation. The interesting thing to note there, though, is that often the 3 bureaus can have different data on you and inconsistent data on you, which isn't good. And you want to correct that as much as possible. And I'm actually still going through the process of correcting my credit file with one of them. I won't say who, but it's been 9 months and they still haven't processed it. So this is a slow moving thing. So yeah, one thing there, if you're in one of those countries, is to just prepare as much as possible in advance of any mortgage or life-changing credit application. And then if you're not in one of those countries, it really depends. There's national credit bureaus, or sometimes there aren't any credit bureaus and banks make decisions on their own using internal ledgers. And so you have to do some research depending on the market. And again, like if people are interested in this, I'm super happy to chat and share anything that I can help with. I think there are also, for the major credit bureau markets, some interesting insights that have certainly tripped me up. So the issue that I'm personally facing is I am supposed to be on the electoral roll, but I move house every 2 or 3 years just because I don't own property and it's just the way that I live at the moment. And so every time I do that, I have to update my electoral register, but also update my address with the credit bureaus. And as mentioned, that can be a months-long process. So definitely doing that. It's a form of KYC for lenders and can be very helpful. The other thing that I see a lot of our customers getting tripped up on is they will have taken out a credit card or a phone contract way back when, or maybe they were the owner of the electricity bill for a shared flat. And then, you move houses, you go to a different place and you don't realize that you're still on the electricity bill. And then your, the flatmates that are left in the house don't manage that responsibly, don't pay on time and whatever. And you end up taking the hit for bad credit behavior. And then these things can really hit you hard for up to 6 years if you don't manage them. So anyway, there are surprising things that can happen like that. And so I think, having proactively looking at your credit file and making sure that nothing there is unusual or starting to make the corrections early is one of the best things you can do.
100% with you on that. And it must be an incredibly busy time for you guys, because certainly for the first time in my life, I've never seen so many businesses and everyday users all united on heavily focusing on managing their finances and managing their credit ratings, etc. So with all that in mind, what's next for Pave? What's your big focus at the moment?
Yeah, great point. And I certainly see the financial responsibility getting higher amongst the general populace, and also the sort of age at which people start caring about this get younger and younger, which is really a great thing. In fact, I think we don't do enough education around basic financial management in school. We teach economics, but not personal finance, which to me is a bit ridiculous. Anyway, our big focus is this Fuse product, where we're very invested in this. We believe there's a very interesting sort of why now moment in the market where the regulators are looking for more robust affordability checks by lenders. We also have sort of that breakthrough in technology and confidence in our algorithms that I mentioned earlier. And so we've been testing this technology with a few lenders in the market, and we're looking to bring this, our first set of clients as soon as possible. And so that's our main focus. And we believe that that's going to be a very powerful way to create systemic change in the next couple of years.
Well, I love chatting with you today. And before I let you go, I always like to leave everyone listening on a slightly more light-hearted note. And at the moment, we're recording this podcast during the summer holidays. And I think for most people, that's one of the few times of the year where they can sit down and read a book. So is there a particular book that has inspired you or means something to you that we can add to our Amazon wish list, and listeners can choose a book from that list? But is there anything you'd leave or add to that list?
Yeah, no, for sure. One of the books that so I read way too much nonfiction. Probably 95% of what I read is nonfiction, which is not good. But within that 5%, there's one book that has stuck with me since I was maybe 16 when I first read it. And it's called Cannery Row by John Steinbeck. It is a hilarious book based in a fishing village in the West Coast, California. And one of the characters in there is someone called Doc, who is a marine biologist that Steinbeck actually used to live and work with. And Doc's approach to life and his philosophy around leadership that you can read between the lines is one that I really look up to. And I go back to that book time and time again. And so, yeah, I think it's a bit of an unusual answer, so I thought I'd throw that in there. But yeah, certainly I derive a lot of insight from that character, who's actually a true person. A real person that did exist. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll get that added to our Amazon wish list. And to make you feel better, I myself probably read 95% of non-fiction. And I would say 95% of the guests that have added a book to our Amazon wish list always go non-fiction. So fair play to you for thinking outside of the box and putting something a little bit different on there. And for anyone listening that just wants to find out more information about yourself, contact your team, or just find out more information about Pave and Fuse, etc., what's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, for sure. The website has got our most general information on it. So that's paveapp.com. And then if you want to chat with me, I'm on SHO@paveapp.com. Or if you want to reach out more broadly to the team, it's team@paveapp.com. Or DM me on LinkedIn. I do check and do respond.
Well, as I said at the very beginning, I always say technology works best when it brings people together. And yes, anyone looking at you guys right now will see that you're on a mission to improve improve access to credit for millions of people by building that world's best credit builder and leveraging technology. And what I've enjoyed more than anything about chatting with you today is the story behind that, the time you've spent in different countries and sitting down and talking with people, hearing those stories and the hardships and how you've gone out to create a solution for those people that you spoke to, essentially. I think it's a beautiful story, and just a big thank you for sharing it with me today.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Very grateful for it.
Wow, I just simply love this. For me, it shows the power of investing time in listening to the stories of people, understanding real world problems, and then going out leveraging technology to try and solve it. I think we've all seen too many times in business where it's new shiny tech first, then, wow, what problem can we solve? So for me, it's always about investing time with people, understanding the problem, and then exploring how you can create a solution to that. And for those reasons alone, I salute Sho for his incredible work there and that time he spent with the homeless and what it taught him about the importance of financial inclusion. But did anything resonate with you today? There may be things that did, maybe things you disagree with. You've heard from me, you've heard from Sho. Now I want to get your voice heard on here. And you can do that by simply emailing me a voice message to techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, @NeilC.Hughes. Keep those messages coming in. Let me know your thoughts. And I also cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow, where we'll tackle a completely different topic. But that's it today, so thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.